How's it going, everybody? And welcome to this review discussion here on GameXplain. I am joined by Blessing Adeoye Jr. of Kinda Funny, and we are going to talk about No More Heroes 3. If you didn't watch our reviews, basically, I liked it a lot. Blessing here, not so much. How did you feel about the game?
I'm torn on it because I love No More Heroes, the franchise. No More Heroes 1 and 2 both hold a very special place in my heart. No More Heroes 3, I was a bit let down by. I would say for me, it felt like a step back in quite a few instances, both in terms of how the game runs and how the game looks on Switch, but then also in terms of how much filler they brought back in. For me, No More Heroes 2 is kind of the superior No More Heroes game compared to No More Heroes 1. I like how in No More Heroes 2 they took away some of the open world elements and really, I would say, pared down on filler. And No More Heroes 3 seems like it brought back a lot of the filler that they had in the first game in ways that I'm not as big of a fan of. But that said, I do like a lot of the Suda 51 stylings that are still in there. You know, I love the cutscenes. I really like Travis Touchdown. I really like the characters. Somehow they deal with some of the characters I don't love so much. There's some characters that you see for a second and then they kind of do away with, and I thought that wasn't as much as what I wanted from that game. But you know, overall, it wasn't the No More Heroes game that I wanted the sequel to No More Heroes 3 to be. But that said, I think if you're a Suda 51 fan or a No More Heroes fan, there's definitely some stuff in there that is worth checking out.
You see, with me, I'm a new Suda fan, so I knew this game was coming out, and I was just like, oh, it's coming out. I might be reviewing it too, which I wound up doing. So I really got to catch up to this series. So I actually finished No More Heroes 1 recently around last month. And same with No More Heroes 2, and I even heard I had to play Travis Strikes Again, so I finished Travis Strikes Again as well, which is very odd, but you know, it's very much a Suda thing to do, make a spin-off sort of like required to play because the story elements on there are just so insane that you would have to know things before going to No More Heroes 3. So I was honestly kind of surprised at how much I did like No More Heroes 3, especially as someone who only just recently got into the franchise, and even hearing from you being like an old school Suda fan, I assumed you played like from the very beginning, right? Like when it came out, or did you get into the series a little later?
I'd say I played around the time it was coming out, maybe like 2011-ish, 2012-ish. So that would have been near-ish after No More Heroes 2. And yeah, it's fun seeing what No More Heroes looks like on Switch, because I think for me, some of the heart of my criticism with it as well comes from the fact that No More Heroes 1 and 2 were designed as Wii games, and as Wii games, they took advantage of using the Wiimote controller. You had some motion stuff in there that I really liked playing it on the Wii. You know, you would go into your combos, and then as you're playing, if you held your Wiimote up, that would be like your light attacks. You press it down, that would be your heavy attacks, right? Or if you finish up a combo and you're about to hit the death blow on an enemy, you would have to swipe the same way that they have it in No More Heroes 3, except in No More Heroes 3, if you're playing it on handheld, you're using the right analog stick as opposed to using the Wiimote. But you can use the motion stuff if you are playing it with just the Joy-Con separated out from the console. And so, like, the way that they took No More Heroes 1 and 2, a franchise that felt very much geared toward the Wii, and translated that to the Switch, I both love and hate in some ways, where they brought back the thing in 3 where in No More Heroes 1 you would get called up before a boss battle and you would have the conversation, and you know, it'd be kind of a good tone setter leading into the next boss battle. It would always end with welcome to the Garden of Madness. That's what they will say in No More Heroes 1. And No More Heroes 3 they say welcome to the Garden of Insanity. And you know, I think those traditions, those rituals work really well on the Wii version. On the Switch version, it's less exciting because on the Wii, when you get a call, you would literally put the Wiimote up to your ear because the speaker would be on the Wiimote, and so it's this fun thing of, oh, it's like I'm getting an actual phone call. But in No More Heroes 3, it's coming out of your speakers because they don't have the same functionality. I wish they found new ways to get creative with those kinds of things, because for me, that's what made No More Heroes 1 and 2, No More Heroes 1 and 2, the fact that they were able to take advantage of the technology they were on. But that said, No More Heroes 3, I think, does have some really cool, unique gameplay moments in terms of just random stuff that would happen in cutscenes that would throw you off. Like, oh, you're gonna do this boss fight, psych, you're gonna do this other boss fight. You know, like that kind of switcheroo stuff still happens in No More Heroes 3, and I think that's key to what makes Suda 51 and Suda 51 in his games, is that he's just a wild guy that's unpredictable.
It's funny you mentioned the bosses that change up, but I think my favorite switch up was like, oh, I'm about to go into real boss battle. Psych, it's musical chairs.
Yeah.
I was just like, oh, okay, this is new right here, but I'm somehow not surprised. This is totally something that a Suda 51 game would do. And you do make a good point about how kind of the charm of No More Heroes when it started out was the fact that it came out, the first one and the second one. Well, the first one came out in 2007 on the, I think it was 2007, yeah, on the Wii, a system that was synonymous with, family friendliness, stuff like that. And then here's this brutally absurd game where people are getting sliced in half, and Suda found a way to make it where, especially when you mentioned the phone thing, I didn't know that was a thing until you just told me right now. So I really regret missing out on that, but my mother would not catch me dead playing that game in her house, so there was no way I was going to be able to play that game until I was like a late teen. But yeah, it totally does kind of lose that sort of charm when it's not on a system that's synonymous with family friendliness as the Wii. The Switch, of course, does have its family friendliness to it as well, but is definitely a system geared more towards like the older crowd, even though there's still games that kids could play on it. But it's definitely not as much of a system like the Wii as it was, especially with the motion controls, which I was kind of surprised at how very little they're implemented, especially having interviewed Suda before playing the game and him saying, like, you have to play this game with motion controls, you just have to. It's very indicative to the game. And then I found out it's really not. You only do it with killer slashes, you only do it when you're plunging toilets. There's maybe an instance where you're playing with Jean and you're throwing the ball, but that's really about it. There's not that much implemented
charging your
there.
lightsaber.
Oh, of course, charging the beam katana like that. And I actually got some comments on my video where I talked about the difference between the button controls and the motion controls. Someone actually said, dude, you're doing it wrong. You gotta put your full body into it when you're doing the slashes. And I'm like, no, I'm not gonna do that.
Yeah, like the average player isn't gonna go all the way in that way. And it's funny because I remember vividly playing the game on Wii, and one of the things I loved about No More Heroes was the motion controls. For me, it was one of the few Wii games that really implemented that stuff in a way that didn't take away from the actual game itself. For non-Nintendo games, I feel like it was always a challenge to make Wii games that felt natural in the way that motion controls were implemented. And yeah, No More Heroes, the franchise, was one of them. And it's fun that you mentioned the family friendliness of the Wii, because yeah, you're absolutely right. It was No More Heroes and it was Mad World. Those were the two, extreme M-rated games with a lot of blood and gore, and they said bad words and all that stuff. And that was part of the charm. In No More Heroes 3, for a game coming out in 2021, I feel like a lot of it still feel like it harkens back to 2007 or 2010, where Travis is calling enemies the same names. I don't know if I can say curse words, but he's calling people names that have like curse words in them, and like generally
he says the same curse word multiple times too, especially during like the flights. He says F head and okay,
F head is the big one, whereas like F head, it was funny the first game, it was fun the second game, but like now that we're here, it's like I'm all in for the dumb stuff, right? I'm all in for the shock value, but I like creative shock value. And so like let's combine some different cuss words. Let's let's go extreme in some other ways. But it's stuff that I nitpick and stuff that I criticize, but also stuff that I can't get mad at, right? Because it's still No More Heroes 3. It is still Travis Touchdown. He's the same character, and I love him for that, right? Like a lot of people love him for that. They love him for the attitude, and so you kind of got to take it with the medicine. The fact that he's still saying those words, and he's still that guy, and he still wants to have a relationship with the tournament organizer whose name escapes me for a second. Sylvia, yeah, thank you so much, Sylvia. He still wants to do things with Sylvia, and it's like, all right, it's the same game, but also I think the thing I keep saying about this game is that if you're a No More Heroes fan and you're a Suda 51 fan and you are coming into it from the perspective of a fan, there's still a lot for you to get out of this game. Like it is not, I don't think No More Heroes 3 is bad by any means. I think, I think there are things that I wish it would evolve in a lot of ways. I wish there are things that did better, but there's still a fan service. There's still the fun combat. There's still the boss fights. There's still the things you come to it for.
Yeah, the combat for me is like, that's what ultimately makes me really give the game a rating of liked it a lot. Same with the story too. Like the story is is the only thing that makes sense about it is that nothing makes sense. Like, all of a sudden, like, his cat Jean is voiced by the same actor who played Spartan Locke in Halo 5, which is just incredible to me. But the combat for me was just a blast. Like, I really liked No More Heroes 2 as well. I especially liked the weighted combat of it. Like, I really felt like Travis really put his weight behind those attacks, and you can definitely feel those a bit in No More Heroes 3, but it also has the fast pace of 1. And I noticed that you said in your review that the bosses are easier, and I think a part of that does have to do with the healing that you can do, like, right away with the sushi. But to me, I didn't mind that as much. In fact, there were some bosses in No More Heroes 2 and 1 that I was just incredibly frustrated by, and so frustrated that I couldn't even heal myself if the pizza health thing was already gone. So I thought that was a welcome change, and I did like the volunteer missions as well. I do get that they are repetitive if you play them over and over again, like in one sitting. But to me, if I played them in short bursts, they were still a fun time, although the grass cutting minigame was my least favorite. I still liked the mission where you shot those giant alligators, or when you're picking up trash and you're suplexing the giant alligators. And I did think that this game was going to get a mixed reception, which of course it did, because it all depends on how people feel about those things. Like, I totally understand someone who thinks that this is all repetitive, and especially the mission structuring is repetitive. But if you really, really like the combat like I do, then chances are you'll be more forgiving with this. And especially now that there's a power-up machine where you can power up your attacks, power up your health, it made the gameplay loop that much more satisfying to me.
Yeah, I definitely hear that, and I will shout out if you lose in the battle, the roulette wheel that gives you like a random either upgrade or sometimes a debuff. I always thought that was a fun thing, and even though that was part of what made the game easier for me, because every now and then I'll get into a tough fight, and then I would land on you actually got back up and you didn't actually lose, and I would continue the fight from where I left off. It's the push and pull of me getting that and going, oh heck yeah, like I get to keep this guy, I get to actually win this fight, like I didn't lose for nothing. But also the thing of but I guess that does make it way easier, because I was beating bosses that way, and if you lose multiple times in a row, the roulette wheel goes slower, so you can't actually pick what upgrade you get. I don't know if you ever lost it that much. There was like one time, right?
Actually, wow.
Yeah, there was one time I did that, and I was like, am I crazy? Is the roulette wheel going really slow? And then I realized what was happening, and I was like, that's a fascinating thing. So like, Student 51 and Grasshopper Manufacturer really threw out difficulty with this one, and it seems like that's a very much on-purpose thing. Because in 1 and 2, I remember struggling in boss fights in 1 and 2. When I went back and I played 1 recently on the Switch, there were multiple boss fights that were reminding me of playing Souls boss fights, where I was losing over and over again. Those games can be really punishing in that. This game is not punishing at all. Like, you'll lose every now and then, of course. Like, I don't expect to get most boss fights on the first try, but on the second try, maybe. On the third try, definitely. It's one of those ones where, you go in with the expectation of winning more than not. And I think that's going to be for some people. For me, who actually preferred the difficulty of 1 and 2, I didn't love them going a bit easier as much, but I do think they tackle that in some creative ways. I like the sushi. I like the roulette wheel. Those things, I think, at the very least, made it fun to lose at times.
Ironically enough, I died a lot on the first boss, and a part of that was probably me just trying to figure out the new gameplay elements and stuff. But yeah, I do agree that it is definitely an easier game. It is a tough balance too, because I've noticed this with a lot of series, especially Metal Gear. I felt like Metal Gear, the games did get easier as they kept going on, because it is a part of like, hey, we want more people to play these games. How do we do that? And one of them is like making them more accessible in a way. And I think that was kind of a struggle they did have with No More Heroes 3, perhaps. But either way, I still did like it a lot because of the combat. It was just so much fun to me. I died more in the designated matches and the defense missions more than I did the bosses. Like, they really did put up quite a big fight there, and that kind of brings me to another topic of there's pretty much no levels in this game. It's not like 1 and 2. There's no levels, but to me that didn't bother me as much, because I didn't feel like the levels really served that much of a purpose other than, oh, here's enemies, kill them. So in a way, I kind of preferred the method in No More Heroes 3, where it was just you go to these certain arenas and you fight bad guys, because either way, though you were gonna fight bad guys regardless.
I'm kind of on the opposite side of it, where I would have preferred having levels over having the open world with designated matches. The designated matches I think were good for not having to just go through random minions. Instead you do have enemies that feel like they're a little bit more catered to making more interesting fighting scenarios. But I do think the place where that falters a bit for me is after I would do like 30 minutes of open world stuff and designated matches and finally getting enough currency to spend at the ATM to then go into the next battle. If I win the next battle in 1 or 2 rounds, which was happening quite a bit for me, that means that I did all of that work for 4 to 5 minutes of a boss fight, and now it's back to the open world BS, and it's like, oh man, I wish I had more time to spend with like this actual boss. I think that's what made the lead up fine for me with the actual levels, is the fact that for in the first game I forget his name. I was gonna call him Badman, but he's not Badman. There's a guy who has a stage that's in a baseball stadium who's more of like a
totally forgot that
country dude. He has like a revolver, I want to say.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. I totally forgot his name too, but yeah.
But to use him, or maybe I can use Bad Girl as an example, because Bad Girl is also from No More Heroes 1. Like, you would go to their levels, and their levels would kind of feed into that personality, or like that, like the story of where they're at, right? Like for the guy who's in the baseball field, I'm going through this stadium and taking out these minions, and then finally I get to the center of the baseball field, and it turns into a boss fight. I think that at the very least allows for that moment to breathe more, as opposed to doing the designated matches in the open world, jumping into the stadium or into the stage to fight the guy or fight the boss, and then being done within 5 minutes, and then it's back to more filler. I kind of missed it, but I think it's just another thing of balancing how exactly you want to shepherd people through the game, because part of me wonders if that was more about budget, because budget-wise, it's way easier to just have these designated matches that take place in the same settings, and you just beam people there, and you just do that over and over again, as opposed to trying to curate levels. I assume that's what it is.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. And I think somebody tells me they really, I don't want to say they rushed this game, but I really feel like it was a game with a very short development cycle as well. Because if they started it right after Travis Strikes Again, then it only took them like 2.5 years. So I wonder if another part of it was time management. So yeah, that's really interesting, something I've noticed. But before we go, I do want to ask you, without spoiling anything, this might be tough without spoilers, but how did you feel about that ending?
Oh my god, I loved it. I love the ending
it was so
much.
Good.
It's funny. I got there and I was like, you crazy person. I love it so much, because I think it is Suda51 doing what Suda51 does best, and it's him giving us the fan service that we love, and it's him making a statement without making a statement. It's great. I love that ending.
Oh man, it's so good. Like, if you want to know what I'm talking about and you don't care about spoilers, just go click on my video where I talk about the ending. Like, oh, it's so good. And I hope we get No More Heroes 4, maybe. Yeah. I know Suda did say on Twitter, like, this was the last one, but I don't buy it.
I don't buy it either. I don't buy it.
Yeah, seriously. But thanks, Blessing, for joining me. Tell us where we can find you, even though I'm pretty sure we all know where we can find you.
Of course, Joey. Thank you so much for having me. If people want to check out more of my work, I'm over on youtube.com/kindafunnygames. I host podcasts like Kinda Funny Games Daily, which is where we talk all about video game news. And I also host PS I Love You XOXO, which is our PlayStation podcast. So you can go check me out there.
Definitely. All right. Thanks so much, Blessing. And if you like this video, be sure to check out the videos on the right for more topics that you might be interested in, including a bunch more No More Heroes 3 content. But thank you all so much for watching. We will see you next time. Bye-bye.